Welcome to The Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. The recent death of a high school senior using illicit fentanyl reminds Americans about the country's opioid crisis. Where do these dangerous drugs come from, and who should be held responsible? In Congress, the January 6th Commission proposal faces a tough battle to garner GOP support. Democrat Senator Joe Manchin is now being pressed harder to drop his support of the filibuster. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom was dealt a major blow. A federal judge ordered him to pay big money over his mistake in handling the pandemic. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. In Louisiana, an 18-year-old student died days before graduation. Haleydykman ingested half a street pill sold as prescription Percocet, but it was likely a counterfeit containing fentanyl. Hailey was an honor roll student with straight A's. She had already been accepted to the University of New Orleans for the fall. Hailey loved school, work, and spending time with friends and family. But the bright life ahead of her irreversibly turned. On the night of May 14th, Hailey and her friend made a devastating decision. They went to buy what they thought was a $30 Percocet pill off the street, and they were going to share it. When EMS arrived at Hailey's house, they were both unresponsive. While her friend survived, Hailey died days later. We used to think teenagers who are attracted to drugs most likely have failing grades. They hang out with other drug users and probably come from a broken home. This was not the case with Hailey, and probably not the case for many other teen drug overdose tragedies, because it's getting increasingly easy for young people to access illicit opioids. To understand the issue better, we have to start with the country's opioid epidemic. Opioids are some of the most effective medications for treating high levels of pain, both chronic and severe. The danger of opioids lies in the fact that they are made from the opium in poppy plants. And opium is extremely addictive. Opioids kill pain by working on the part of the brain that is in charge of regulating pain and reward, or euphoria. In 2019, about 70,000 people died from drug overdose in the United States. 68% of these deaths were from overdosing on synthetic opioids. Over 10 million people misused prescription opioids, and 1.6 million people had opioid use disorder, and another 1.6 million people misused prescription pain relievers for the first time. The misuse of opioids, including prescription pain relievers, heroin, and synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, is a national crisis. The crisis is not only a threat to public health, it's an enormous burden on the economy. The CDC estimates that the total cost of prescription opioid misuse alone is $79 billion a year, and that includes the cost of health care, lost productivity, addiction treatment, and criminal justice involvement. So how did things get to this stage? In the late 1990s, pharmaceutical companies assured the medical community that patients would not become addicted to prescription opioid painkillers. Since then, healthcare providers have been prescribing opioids at faster and greater rates. This subsequently led to widespread misuse of these medications before it became clear that opioids could be highly addictive. We now realize how grossly irresponsible those pharmaceutical companies were. Among the different kinds of opioids, fentanyl is the most powerful. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that's approximately 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine. 2 milligrams of fentanyl is enough to kill a person. The more dangerous part is, in recent years, fake prescription drugs that are sold as the painkiller oxycodone or Percocet or the anxiety medication Xanax are sometimes fentanyl. According to the Drug Enforcement Administration, 1 in 4 counterfeit pills made with fentanyl contains a lethal dose. Dan Schneider is a small-town pharmacist in Louisiana. He suffered a tragic loss when his son was shot dead in 1999 during a drug deal gone wrong. After he learned the police were reluctant to help him, Schneider was determined to find answers for his son's death. To his surprise, he also uncovered the looming opioid epidemic in his community, and ever since, Schneider has made it his mission to raise awareness about the crisis. His story is actually detailed in the Netflix crime documentary series, The Pharmacist. In the wake of Hailey's death, Schneider is working with local schools to share the following message about the danger of fentanyl and street drugs. Parents and students, please be alert and aware that there are fake prescription pills such as Xanax, Percocet and Adderall on the street and available through social media. These fake pills contain deadly amounts of the very potent opioid called fentanyl. One pill can kill. Never take anything unless it's prescribed by a doctor and gotten from a pharmacy. In the past, experimenting with things was wrong, but not usually deadly. Now, this illicit fentanyl is in almost anything not from a pharmacy and is killing students. Stay away from drugs and alcohol. Your brains are still developing, and even if they are not immediately deadly, they can damage your brain. Also, watch out for friends who might be experimenting. Care, don't cover. Report any using or dealing anonymously if necessary to parents or teachers. So where does fentanyl come from? China remains the primary source of fentanyl and all fentanyl-related substances trafficked into the United States. Drug traffickers have two primary methods for delivering fentanyl manufactured in China. They can ship the drug directly into the U.S. through international mail or ship it into Mexico and then smuggle it into the U.S. The Chinese Communist Party has inadequate regulation on drugs, leaving room for an estimated 160,000 chemical companies with the ability to produce and export fentanyl. The Trump administration made several attempts to persuade the CCP to address this issue, but they were unsuccessful. However, Beijing's reluctance to control the drug is likely intentional. Some experts say it's in fact a carefully planned strategy by the hostile communist power as a form of chemical warfare. Jeff Nyquist, researcher of Chinese and Russian strategy, said China is using fentanyl as a, quote, very effective tool. He said the synthetic opioid opens up a number of opportunities to penetrate the country, both in terms of laundering money and blackmail against those who participate in the trade and become corrupt, like law enforcement, intelligence, and government officials. According to Nyquist, Beijing also uses the enormous amount of money generated by exporting fentanyl to support its influence operations in the United States. Although not all opioid-related deaths in America can be blamed on China's fentanyl business, as domestically prescription overdoses are also serious. China is still a significant contributor to America's opioid epidemic. Dr. Robert J. Bunker, instructor at the University of Southern California, said, contributing to a major health crisis in the U.S., while simultaneously profiting from it, would, in my mind, give long-term CCP plans to establish an authoritarian Chinese global system as challenge to Western liberal democracy. Dr. Bunker added, producing and sending fentanyl to the U.S. could be considered low-risk drug warfare, which is very much in line with the means and methods advocated in the book Unrestricted Warfare. The book was authored by two Chinese Air Force colonels in 1999. In the 2020 DEA intelligence report, the flow of fentanyl into the United States in 2019 became more diverse, with new source and transit countries emerging as significant trafficking routes. Mexican transnational criminal organizations are producing increased quantities of fentanyl and illicit fentanyl-containing pills. Fentanyl is being smuggled across the U.S.-Mexico border in low concentration but high-volume loads. At the same time, India is emerging as a source for finished fentanyl powder and fentanyl precursor chemicals. The issue with illicit fentanyl has become so dire that on April 27th, the DEA announced a new initiative, Project Wave Breaker, to disrupt the flow of deadly fentanyl into the United States. Under the Biden administration, open border policy, drug cartels, and smuggling are rampant. A CBP official told Congress last week that fentanyl seizures at the U.S.-Mexico border have increased 308% in 2021. To put it another way, border officials seized more fentanyl from January to April this year than all of 2020. This is an indisputable indication of the continued crisis at the southern border. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been sounding the alarm that April's seizures of fentanyl increase alone are enough to kill 20 million people. Now that's roughly the population of the state of New York. National Border Patrol Council President Brandon Judd didn't hold back criticism of the Biden administration's handling of the border crisis. During a Republican tour of the border on Monday, Judd pointed out that he started his career under President Clinton and has served multiple Democratic and Republicans since then, but he's never seen or worked under policies that are worse than those of the current administration. He said, "I have never seen an administration invite people to violate laws and then reward them for violating our laws. Illegal immigrants today pay drug cartels to cross the border. The council's VP did a rough calculation of the cartel's profit over the border crisis.
I want you to think about this number. There has been over 200,000 individuals during this fiscal year that have gotten past and now are in the United States. Now, if you multiply that by $4,000 a piece, that's over $800 million that's being put in the cartel's pockets. You hear about budget. They're not working on a budget. They're loving it right now. They're using this. It's created a magnet for the cartels, for the human smuggling, for the sex trafficking, and all that has been created under this current administration. As far as I'm concerned, those individuals that are suffering, those people that are putting their children in the hands of these smugglers, it falls on the hands of this administration.
But Representative Barry Moore of Alabama said many of the illegals don't have the money to pay the drug cartels. What do they do in this case?
These people coming across the border, they don't have the money to pay the Mexican drug cartel. So we're creating two things with current policies out of the White House of Joe Biden. We're creating drug mules. In other words, if you agree as an immigrant from Mexico or El Salvador, Nicaragua, wherever you're coming from, and you have a bill to the Mexican drug cartel, who, by the way, controls your U.S. southern border right now, you can backpack a little fentanyl, a little heroin, whatever you want to backpack, cocaine, and pay your passage. Or you can become a slave to the Mexican drug cartel. And oh, by the way, they know where your family lives. So you're going to make those payments back to Mexico to the drug cartel to pay your passage to this country.
The cost of allowing cartels to flourish is at the grave expense of the American people, because deadly drugs like fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine don't end up at the border. They are coming into your district, your communities, and your children's schools. Moore said the government has the responsibility to secure the border. He called on the media and individuals to hold the Biden administration accountable.
None of our Democrat friends are here. Kamala Harris hadn't been here. I've been here twice. She's Vice President of the United States. She's the drug czar. 60 days on the job. She's been everywhere but the southern border. We as media and individuals need to call them out and hold them accountable.
Now, before we continue, I want to take a moment and talk about yesterday's show. It's now clear that we are being shadow banned. During the first 47 minutes of the episode yesterday, YouTube Analytics said it had 0 views, and the views in general for the episode is much lower than usual. It appears criticizing some celebrities, or the CCP for that matter, is not allowed on this platform, and this has happened to us before. It's disappointing to see the team's hard work not being seen by people. So we need your help. Please share our video right now to at least one of your friends. At this point, only your support and word of mouth is going to work. I appreciate you, and together we can fight through this censorship. But looking on the bright side, today I have the pleasure of toasting yet another amazing eye-opener supporter, Scott Connor. Scott left me a comment yesterday letting me know he received his mug that matters. So everyone, let's grab our mugs and let me say thank you to Scott Connor. Your support is greatly appreciated. And thanks to all of you who watch the show every day. Salute. In Washington, Senate Democrats are hoping to bring the House-passed legislation on the January 6th commission to the floor next week. The commission proposed by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is facing stiff opposition from Republicans. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called the commission duplicative and potentially counterproductive. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is also against the move. He said on the Senate floor, "After careful consideration, I've made the decision to oppose the House Democrats' slanted and unbalanced proposal for another commission to study the events of January the 6th. As the bill faces an onerous battle to garner GOP support in the Senate, 2 Democrats who defend the filibuster pleaded with Republicans to support the bill. In a joint statement, Senator Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema called the creation of the commission critical to prevent similar attacks from occurring again. They said, "We implore our Senate Republican colleagues to work with us to find a path forward on a commission to examine the events of January 6th. For these reasons, Manchin and Sinema are facing even greater pressure to join their Democratic colleagues in junking the Senate's filibuster. But despite all the pressure, just like Sinema, Manchin has reaffirmed his commitment to keep the Senate rule intact. Manchin said that even if Republicans block the bill, he will not support blowing up the filibuster. So far, only Republican Senators Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski have definitively said that they will vote in support of the commission. Around the country, after George Floyd's death last year, groups such as Black Lives Matter have been calling to defund the police. Some Democratic-controlled cities such as New York, Baltimore, Portland, Minneapolis, and Seattle reduced the budget for their police departments. Crime rose at an alarming rate. An FBI report confirmed in 2020, murders countrywide increased at least 25% from 2019. That amounts to more than 20,000 murders in a year for the first time since 1995. Gun violence soared as well. Last year, the number of mass shootings, which are classified as incidents with 4 or more being shot, rose to 600, a near 50% increase from 2019. Because of the surges in crime levels, many city officials are now taking back statements to defund the police. In Baltimore, the city cut about $22 million from the police department's budget last year, but recently approved a budget with a $28 million increase to the department. In Minneapolis, a number of city councilors pledged to completely abolish the police last year, but several months ago, the council voted to add $6.4 million to the department budget. Mayor Jacob Frey, a Democrat, announced in May that he's pushing to increase funding to the Minneapolis Police Department. The Los Angeles City Council approved more budget for their police department to hire 250 more officers, which comes with the backdrop of rising crime in the city. Portland followed suit. Mayor Ted Wheeler said that the increase in crime in the city had reached crisis proportions and requested an additional $2 million in police funding in March. The list of cities moving to refund the police just keeps growing. Defund the police is a political movement incited by radical groups and the left. It's never been popular among the vast majority of Americans. This anti-law enforcement movement directly resulted in the disastrous surge of crime across the nation. It's now time to support our police and safeguard the American people. Finally, we have good news regarding religious freedom in the country. In California, federal judge Jesus Bernal ordered Governor Gavin Newsom to pay $1.35 million for the lockdown of 3,000 churches amid the coronavirus pandemic. Newsom is required to pay the cost and attorney fees for a lawsuit from Harvest Rock Church that went to the United States Supreme Court. The judge said Newsom and other state officials cannot set limits on church attendance unless a specific set of infection statistics occur. For example, Bernal ruled limitations on church gatherings can only be imposed if child infections rise 100%, or available ICU bed capacity drops to under 20%. Matt Staver, founder of Liberty Counsel, a nonprofit law firm that represented Harvest Rock Church, told the Washington Examiner that Newsom is the worst governor in America when it comes to religious freedom. Staver said the governor's COVID restrictions intentionally discriminated against churches while providing preferential treatment to many secular businesses and gatherings. Judge Bernal's ruling is permanent. Before Newsom faces his recall at the end of the year, the California government will not be able to lock down churches again. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out this playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me on the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on YouMaker, Gab, and Parler. Now don't forget, please sign up to the email list so that we can stay in contact with each other. I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.